Hello everybody! Chocolate Guy, the cartoon reviewer here, and welcome back to my list of the top 5 best Simpsons Season 7 episodes. In this video, I'll be discussing my honorable mention picks. If you haven't seen the previous parts in the series, I suggest you do so first. If you enjoy this video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more videos similar to this in the future, and to stay tuned for upcoming parts in this series. Also, comment down below on what you thought of the episode I talked about in this video, what you think will be number 1, and what your own list would be. Commenting and engaging helps spread my channel around YouTube, so any engagement would be very appreciated. Lastly, links to other videos I've made, along with the other parts in this series and music I used in this video, will be in the description below. And with all that said, let's jump right back into the list. Before I reveal what my favorite episode of Simpsons Season 7 is, we have 12 honorable mentions. This is an absolutely fantastic season, and there are many episodes besides the top 5 that are the reason why. Some of them also try their hand at character study stuff, while others try really big experimental ideas or go for huge laughs. Either way, they're all great and deserve to get recognized for that reason, despite not making the list proper. A great conclusion to what the last episode set up. Well, nowhere near as good as the first part, as it is a little repetitive with how it goes about its story, and it's not as funny or cinematic as the first part, but there's still many funny moments, and the story is still fun with many great twists and turns, leading to a good conclusion, even if the episode can still be a little formulaic at points. A fun movie parody-centered plot that gets many great jokes out of its concept. I love that Milhouse is the star of the show here. They get so many great comedic moments out of him, and his story and banter with other characters is just great. There are also just so many other fun scenes and iconic moments to boot. It might not be the most interesting episode, and there definitely are funnier ones and ones that try to do a lot more, but I can't knock this one for being pretty great. This is a truly remarkable one that puts the entire Simpson family into an interesting plot with a great setup and killer ending. It's so interesting, but also funny watching Marge and Homer have to go through this parent teaching course, and Bart and Lisa dealing with the weird situation of living with Ned Flanders while that's happening, and how the story and stakes slowly escalates throughout. There's so many funny moments, but this episode also has a strong story that looks at how much the Simpson family actually cares for each other, especially how much Marge cares for her kids, and what happens when they're separated and put in a different family, and the fear that they might fully integrate into that new one. And it's all the more interesting and funny that it's the Flanders family that this is happening in. This isn't one of my personal favorites because I don't think it's as interesting or as funny as some others, but it's still a highlight. This is definitely an episode I want to love a lot more than I do, and I'm betting many of you thought it would make it somewhere on the list proper. I like the way this changes Lisa's character for the future. This feels like a natural development for her character, and the episode handles it well, leading to an interesting conflict that shows off how Lisa acts after she becomes a vegetarian towards others who aren't, especially her immediate family, but more specifically Homer. The story is great for many reasons, and there are so many fantastic jokes, along with a sweet ending and an interesting look at Lisa's character after this development. But I will say this episode isn't as nuanced in its discussion of vegetarianism as I think it should, making this episode feel a little too simple at points. But this is still a thoughtful one that has some interesting stuff to say. While not my favorite Treehouse of Horror, as this one didn't make the top 5 list, it's still one of the best. It just tells 3 great stories that tries to accomplish different things, from comedy to scares to pushing some boundaries, and it succeeds at all 3. I do especially love that they do try to push some boundaries with early 3D television animation at the time. For that at least, it should be recognized as being pretty great, but even without that, this is just a fun package of stories. While not as well written in my opinion as previous years, this is still another win for the Treehouse of Horror series. This is one of the funniest episodes of the season, and the show, up there with some of the all-time best of other seasons. Well, it's not quite as good as those, or Bart Sells His Soul, which is why it lost out from making it on the actual list proper, against some episodes that really go all out with their stories of diving into our characters, and as I said, Bart Sells His Soul is just a funnier episode overall. But this episode is still such a wonderful, hilarious concept that is done extremely well, and they use to tell so many hilarious jokes after joke. This is one of Marge's best episodes of the series. It's so interesting to see someone as accepting and nice as Marge devolve into being kind of stuck up and nasty when she's offered the opportunity to be accepted in this country club and be seen as being in a higher or nicer social class as a result. This episode tackles so many things around that story that are pretty complex and interesting, and it makes Marge so much more of a multi-layered character than ever before. And the episode doesn't feel dated at all when a plot like this, told at this time, definitely could have been. I will say, for how complex this episode can be, it can also be a little too simple and on the nose at points. But at the same time, that's a very minor problem that doesn't really take away from the episode too much, but it's still enough to keep it away from the list, even if they write Marge and her story here so well. Homer the Smithers is just a great use of a fun concept. The story takes many fun twists and turns, and there's so many funny gags, along with it leading to a fun ending sequence and a good ending. There's nothing super fantastic here, but it's all really good, if not great. Bart on the Road is another episode that is just a lot of fun, and I really wanted to put it on the list because there are parts of this episode that I just enjoy watching so much. For how far-fetched this concept is, our characters feel so real. And not in a anything is particularly greatly written kind of way, just that the conversations they have make them more alive than ever. To an extent with Bart, but especially with Homer and Lisa. There are just so many fun aspects of this story, and it's a pretty chill episode overall until further into it, and it just lets that fun concept play out, along with once again having really solid gags. There's nothing deep, there's nothing that funny, and you could say because this episode has such a fun plot on their hands, and they don't do anything too crazy with it, that it's a missed opportunity of an episode, and to an extent I agree with that. It does make me like this one for more of its parts than its whole, but I can't deny I still love this one and just find the entire experience charming and the definition of fun, to be very, very blunt and repetitive. Especially Homer and Lisa stuff, which I just enjoy watching so much for how real they feel here and how cute it is. 22 short films about Springfield was an episode I was sure was gonna make the top 5 list right before I sat down to actually make it. It's iconic, has some of the best bits and gags of the show, and is just the best use of a great concept and format. What is there to really say that hasn't already been said? It is exceptional. But the episodes I put on the list were just so strong that it barely missed out. You could consider this my honorary number 6. Well, this or the next episode. Just an intense, atmospheric episode, with a great story, some awesome twists and turns, and so many funny and action-y scenes to count. And at the center of it all, a pretty decent Bart and Grandpa story. This episode almost made the list for how great its story was, and how it took such a big idea and went all the way with it to make such a different episode for the season. Also, once again, just how incredible the atmosphere is. But just like 22 short films about Springfield, it barely missed out for the same reason. This one almost missed the honorable mentions, but I decided to leave it on because it does tackle an important issue in a good way through an interesting story with much satire and funny jokes. While it does what the story tries to do well, this episode can be a little too simple for my liking, and even if I thought this episode was amazing, I don't know if I could, in good faith, put it on the list, because I know Apu is a complicated character, and this is a strange episode involving him that makes it kind of weird to watch. So I'm just not the biggest fan of this one, but credit where credit is due. This is still a highlight from the season that achieves what it tries to very well. But with all that said, stay tuned for the final part of this list series to see which episode topped all of that, and the one I consider to be the best episode of Simpsons Season 7.